New friend, Anonio. Hello. Yeah, I first kind of met Anonio through reading his first book, Satipatthana. I had just moved into a cabin in the woods, about a mile away from the retreat center where I teach. So having only just moved in, his book came out, wonderful synchronicity. And I thought, well, my name is Jewel of Mindfulness, something I'm still trying to live up to, so I should really read this book. So I started, I spent the first few months of living in Temple Cabin, where I now live, avidly studying his book and practicing the meditations. And so I think it was the only book I read for months. I mean, I was just really going through it kind of paragraph by paragraph and delighting in Anonio's clarity, actually, and his faithfulness to the early tradition. And after a few months, I remember writing him, managed to get in touch with him by email and asked him some questions about Vedana, which he very kindly answered. That was really useful. So we have had a connection before, Anonio. And I'm really glad to renew the connection now. So, welcome. Yeah, so the title of our session takes its name from Anonio's probably 20th book, something that came out a couple of years ago called Mindfully Facing Climate Change. I'll just hold it up for the camera so you can see that. And I bought this a couple of weeks ago, so I prepared for the interview. So I've been reading it the last few days. So yeah, so now something like 18 years since moving into the cabin, I'm once more reading one of Anonio's books. And this morning I was putting into practice his meditation, his 4 meditations. So looks like I've come full circle in a way. And in a way, this time connecting with something that we also having strongly in common, which is concern for the state of the world, concern for sentient beings across the planet, and how to address the, in a way, crisis that humanity is heading into at this time of human history. I think you may agree with me, Anonio, that there has been no time in human history when the dangers facing our human race are never so dire and dangerous as they are now. So really, if the Buddha had been alive when this was happening, he would certainly have been talking about it, because how could you not? So it's very appropriate that he too thinks, well, we really need to be applying the principles of our practice to the times that we live in so that we can respond to this. So I thought I'd start by, just as probably few of you have already read the book, I'll just briefly review the different parts of the book and then ask Anonio to or maybe draw him out on some of the bits I find particularly interesting anyway, and see if he's got anything more to say. Like his first book, I was delighted by the clarity. You know, he's been really reflecting deeply on this, and his amazing fluency of language, given that it's his not his first language. And I particularly liked the way he balances compassionate engagement with equanimity, which is in a way a timeless balance that goes right back to the Buddha. You know, how to balance compassionate concern for trying to improve things for people and life generally with not letting yourself get panicked or get taken over by impatience or anger or any of the root defilements, in other words. So having a way of engaging compassionately while not getting overwhelmed by the greed, hatred and delusion. So I loved that. And he brought out particular ways in which these days people often do fall into greed, hatred and delusion in trying to face climate change. And then in a way, if we as practitioners, Buddhist practitioners, can draw on our experience to help everyone not to get overwhelmed and to face into what's happening with peace and steadiness and compassion and creativity. He had some very interesting things to say about not getting caught up in anger, for example, later on. He talked about how the early tradition makes a priority of human liberation. So even though all life on earth is a beautiful thing in many ways, this particular life form of human beings are capable of enlightenment, and that is exceptional. And we can, if we can live well, and if we can really live up to our full potential, our Buddha potential as human beings, then we can learn to respect other life forms and treat them really, really well, so that we can bring about a harmonious relationship with the environment. And that is a priority for early Buddhism, and I regard it as a priority in the 21st century too. All life matters, but well, we need to take responsibility for our species and what we do. We can't really, that's the priority. So that's really the main point of chapter 1. And then chapter 2 is the ethics of the mind, referring to the discourse of the world ruler, the Buddha's advice to rulers, how to rule well, so that you can look after your population and look after your environment in the process. That if you make a priority of living ethically and encouraging your people to live ethically, then ecological, good governance of the environment follows from that. And this is where he goes into the denial and anger and resignation as common pitfalls and how to avoid them. And then the chapter 3 is about the Brahma Viharas, loving kindness, metta, compassion, sympathetic joy and equanimity, as a key way of training the mind. And chapter 4 is about the Noble Eightfold Path and how it applies in the 21st century. Taking responsibility for our impact on the environment, minimizing our carbon footprint, thinking about vegetarian diet, taking great care in how we speak to others, speaking without false speech, frivolous speech, harsh speech or divisive speech, so we can speak for harmony and concord, we can speak for empathy and mutual understanding. And then also an important part of chapter 4 was the value of coming to terms with impermanence, making our peace with impermanence. Because unless we can make our peace with impermanence, we can never be at peace. And if we cannot be at peace, how can we make peace in the world? How can we make peace with the reality of climate change if we cannot first make peace with impermanence? It is impermanence. Climate change is impermanence manifesting. It is death manifesting on a vast scale. There's so much death going on. We need to take a deep breath, steady ourselves, and just quietly accept the reality of the impermanence of this situation, so that we can be steady enough to face it really well. creatively, compassionately, wisely. So that was my personal summary for the benefit of those who've not read the book. And I just wondered if I've missed anything important out, Analia, anything to add at this point. You can unmute yourself, Analia, we can't hear you.
Yeah, I just wanted to let you talk, but it was beautiful, thank you.
Okay, right. So, yeah, I thought I'd then sort of home in on some of the things I particularly found interesting personally, and then draw you out a little, say more on those things. And first of all, in chapter 1, I particularly liked your little section on appreciating the beauty of nature. And you were quoting one of my favorite suttas, discourses, the Mahagosinga Sutta in the Pali Canon. It's in the Majjhima Nikaya. And this is where Shariputra is just, he's just delighting with some of his fellow Arahant monks in the beauty of Gosinga Solitary Wood, in which several important events take place in Buddhist history. So there's another of my favorite suttas, the Chula Gosinga Sutta, which is about the three Anuruddhas living together in perfect harmony. They're like milk blending with water, as the discourse says. So that's a beautiful image of how human beings could be if we can only train ourselves and work on our relationships. It's an image of how humanity could be living on the earth, that little discourse on the three Anuruddhas. So this is yet another discourse that takes place in Gosinga Wood, where Sariputra is delighting in Anuruddha, and also Ananda, Revata, Mahakassapa, Mahamoggallana. And he's rejoicing in their human qualities. So he's rejoicing in their beautiful human qualities in the midst of all this beauty of nature. So you're talking about the value of appreciation there, Analio, and there is Sariputra really rejoicing in the merits of the enlightened ones, because they are all enlightened ones he's talking about. It's a kind of devotional practice, really. And it has always struck me that gratitude and appreciation alongside metta and compassion are also ways of opening the heart, and opening the heart to nature as well as each other. And that has such a big part to play in how we work with this situation. So I just ask you if you'd like to say more about that.
Well, I agree with you that appreciation and gratitude are very important factors. And I think the way I read Mahagosinga is also really this idea that the more we purify the mind, the more we'll appreciate natural beauty. And this is really what I get out of that, this kind of sense that, particularly in ancient India, where they had lots of more forests and nature, there was a kind of an attraction of the civilized parts, but that there's this statement like, look, when you purify the mind, it's not this apparently attraction of civilizations, in bracket of whose drawbacks we have by now become much more aware, close bracket, but it's just nature as such that can inspire the mind, that can uplift the mind. So there's this moonlit night in the Gosinga forest, and then each of the monks goes and brings out their own qualities, and everybody's like, yeah, this one is very learned, deep meditation, asceticism. And in the end, they go to the Buddha and say, who was right? The Buddha says, you were all right. All right. But let me tell you another one. He talks about himself. His determination to become awakened. So it's this beauty of nature interwoven with this taste of liberation, of the vacation of the mind. It is for me something that I really like to take along this course. And that also enables me to avoid becoming sad when the beauty is being destroyed by others. Because I have some essence that nobody can touch. Just like it just happened 2 days ago, a black bear came by. I was sitting in meditation and I was suddenly hearing some loud noise, some breathing out, like, and I look up and just to the left to myself, there was this black bear walking by. And then he just kept walking over there. And so I took an iPhone and took a little video of him walking away and I sent it off. And it was interesting to see how my Dharma friends reacted. Some were rejoicing in the beauty of the bear, but others were all like, yeah, but how much longer? Climate change, you know. Yes, I'm aware of the fact that these animals are all being threatened. I'm aware of the fact that living conditions deteriorating, that bear will not be able to live. But let me enjoy the moment when it just works fine. Let me have these two in balance. That was what came up for me.
Yes. Yes, I really share your enthusiasm, really. I mean, this is probably why Buddhist retreat centers are located in the countryside, because I mean, like you live in. Do you live in the Bar retreat center in America these days, Alania?
Yeah,
do you still live there?
Outer edge of the center, so my hut
Yes.
is right by the forest, and there's a large forest here. And there's a little water pool, so animals come here to drink. And I've had a mountain lion, elk, all kind of wild animals. And you know, normally your eyes are closed, but when they make noise, then you look like, oh, who's this? Wow! It's very beautiful because by now they know me, and the animals are not afraid of me, even the very small ones, like the chipmunks. That just happened 2 weeks ago. I have this. I hope I'm not babbling too much about my personal experience.
No, at all.
I have this habit of doing walking meditation, and I always stop when any animal comes by to give them the right of way, because I think they are the original inhabitants here. And I also do it with the chipmunks. And the chipmunks are not at all used to that. They're used to everybody's chasing them. So there was this chipmunk chasing by to my left, and so I just stopped and thought, like, if I don't move, it won't get afraid. And I turned around, looked at me, and suddenly came dashing towards me, climbed on my sandal, and started to sniff my toe, investigating my toe. And I felt the nose, I felt the fur, and then it ran off again. So we have all these beautiful experiences with the animals, but I'm not clinging to them. You know, these animals will not be able to live for much longer. Always holding this, what you said, the compassion and emptiness part, holding this to imbalance. That is for me really the key about climate change, that in the moment I enjoy, but the impermanence, as you rightly said, the impermanence is so present all the time.
Yes, beautifully put. Well, this is probably why so many Buddhist retreat centers are located in the country, that contemplating nature skillfully in a way of appreciating its beauty, but also recognizing the impermanence as well, is such a precious practice for us. And I know that, I mean, like you, I have led, I've been a teacher on Buddhist retreats, and I've noticed how when people come from the city into the countryside, their whole body mind can calm down, and their heart opens, and then already they're halfway there to meditation. Even before you start teaching mindfulness of breathing, they're kind of nearly halfway there, just because of the effect of them opening to nature. So these days I really encourage people to cultivate appreciation and gratitude for what they love, especially for natural beauty. And as you say, the ultimate value in the Dharma is the qualities of the awakened mind, the qualities of enlightenment. But we can also appreciate nature and beauty as part of our practice. And when I'm teaching beginners who don't know anything about Buddhism and they don't really have any faith in Buddhism, I always start a practice by inviting them to have gratitude to the earth as a preliminary, and then we get into the meditation. For those people on more advanced retreats who have come to really love the Dharma and love the Buddha and love the Sangha, then we start with devotional practice, because that's also a way of gratitude opening the heart, and it has the same effect. But as you make progress in the spiritual life, you come to appreciate what is essentially of greatest value. And even though the things of nature arise and pass away, the qualities of the awakened mind have maybe a value that transcends all that. I wondered if you'd like to say more about that, Analayo.
I basically very much agree with what you say. And that's also a very beautiful progression, to take people in from appreciation of the nature, not imposing something on them that is foreign to them. And when they then have come to flavor it, the transformative and inspiring dimensions of that inspiration, then to direct it and set it into a Buddhist context. So I really like that idea. It's a very skillful approach. For me, the important thing is what I was trying to say before also, that how do I express this? That I don't make my carbon footprint into some sort of original sin. The rest of my life, I'm living with this guilt of being part of the destruction of humanity. Everything is so terrible. I don't want that. That's not a skillful state of mind. But I do want to be aware of what's happening. Every day I'm meditating on climate change. I'm very clear about that. But I can still laugh. I can still enjoy whatever is there. I know His Holiness, he does that very beautifully. Sometimes they tell him something horrible and he will start crying, the Dalai Lama. And then short after, he suddenly starts laughing again. And this is something I find very inspiring, this kind of picking up again. And this is where, in my understanding, the perception of emptiness also comes in. However beautiful nature is, it's also empty. Hey. Not using emptiness as an excuse to become indifferent, to no longer take responsibility, but just as a very skillful way to counterbalance. And I find this itself is just such a powerful boost to the practice. Thanks to taking about climate change. This is also where I see the... I'm sorry?
No, you finish.
And this is also where I see the overall potential. And this is like every course I teach now, at the end, I bring up the topic of climate change, because I want people to have an opportunity to talk about it. And I always say the situation is very serious. It looks very bad, but there's an opportunity in that. And even though we may say it looks more probable that it's going to end bad, history doesn't work according to the law of probabilities. Alexander the Great came from Macedonia, a small little country up there in the north, conquered the Persian Empire. Impossible. Absolutely. I mean, in terms of probability, not even 1 out of 100, and he did it. And we are not as bad as 1 out of 100. We just have lesser probability that we will succeed. But never mind, we have that vision that if humanity survives this crisis, humanity will be forced to change its way. How they deal with each other and how they deal with the environment. So there is this opportunity, this potential, this option for us to be part of the positive forces who work for a raise in global awareness. Stepping out of I and you towards me. Stepping from power over towards power with. To have the broader picture. And it doesn't have to have the Dharma label on top. I mean, I'm coming from a Buddhist background, obviously, but this can be very non-denominational. It doesn't have to have some sort of clearly defined religious identity. It has a practice at the core, mindfulness. But mindfulness has, thanks to MBSR and all these things, has now spread worldwide without a religious overlay. So it can be accessed in different parts of the world. And this is, I think, where different positive forces can converge and just make our contribution and see if we can have that step into the positive direction. But then again, with that vision of the beauty that can come out of this catastrophe, I do my part, but then also let go. No monocausality. No analysis, the boss here tells everybody what to do. No. I just do my part, and then I let go. Democracy. If the majority of humanity decides we want to be destroyed, majority decision. So, what to do?
So there is a balance between compassionate concern and equanimity. Yeah. And without the equanimity, we cannot be steady enough to be compassionately effective. We need both. And this is one of the things that I loved about your book, and I recognize it's a common theme, isn't it, in the Dharma? In a way, it's the balance between compassion and wisdom. Contemplating wisely helps us to remain steady and accept the reality of the situation and make our peace with it. And on the other hand, compassion motivates us to try to make things better out of concern and trying to help people and help life, but particularly the human beings live better towards life in relation to life. I thought next I'd have a look at something that comes out in chapter 2, which is common reactions to climate change in the general population. And you talked about how greed, hatred and delusion are commonly manifest as denial, anger and resignation. And I thought that was really interesting because it really brings it down to practice. You talked about how some powerful politicians and wealthy, powerful individuals in the world have a vested interest in denying climate change because it can rationalize them just carrying on as business as usual in the same old way of amassing wealth and letting the loggers in the Amazon, for example, giving them free rein to decimate the Amazon rainforest because there is no such thing, it's all a hoax. And actually you make the point that very often people who deny climate change are doing so partly or often because they have a vested interest. They are attached to the life of endless consumption. And you were saying that, I'll just move on to working with anger because I want to get on to that point as well. You talked about the danger of getting caught up in anger about the situation. I just wanted to quote something from your book which kind of puts it very beautifully. You said, although anger puts things into sharp relief and thereby can create a superficial impression of clarity, it actually distorts perceptual appraisal of the situation and prevents a balanced and correct discernment. A mind in the grip of anger is unable to see accurately what is for one's own benefit and for the benefit of others. Anger encourages a tunnel vision that ignores aspects of the situation that do not accord with its evaluative thrust. Such a condition of the mind needs to be recognized with mindfulness. It calls for refraining from taking action until the mind has cooled down, as only then does it become possible to see things in their proper perspective. In this way, the current crisis is best handled with a mind that is not in a condition of anger. Instead of anger, compassion is the appropriate motivating force. And further down you say, due to the influence of the defilements, narrow-mindedness and selfishness, Some have not yet realized that it is high time to adjust. No need to hate them for that. Instead, out of a compassionate sense of responsibility for life on this planet, the needful should be done to promote the necessary change with stern and strong actions rooted in the mental attitude of compassion and equanimity. So that was beautifully put, I thought. And you talked about the need to let go of anger, wait till the mind has calmed down before you engage in activity. And I thought I'd ask you about that because there's a process there, isn't there? And I know that when you're talking about working with emotions, you always talk about not just suppressing them, but on the other hand, not just acting them out. You make a space, you make a mindful space in which you neither suppress nor act out. You let the emotion manifest within your awareness, and then you work with it appropriately. And in that way, you can transform the energy of the anger until, without suppressing that energy, it becomes available to engage into effective, compassionate activity. So I thought I'd ask to draw you out on that process of transforming the energy into anger into effective, passionate, compassionate activity.
Yeah, a good example for me was what you just spoke about. There was at one point, I don't normally look, I don't look TV or anything, but I just check on Wikipedia, and they were showing this a picture taken from out of space of South America, and you could see how much of the continent was in flames. And even now, as I think of it, I can again feel what's coming up. And so I look at the picture, take it in, and then I let it sink in. Then I just wait until the mind becomes calm again. And it took me, I think, 2 or 3 days before I could call up that image again, because it's just, I mean, if you see it, the whole of South America, I mean, it was more than half of it was in flames, man. And because of, I don't even want to say the name. No, this is not, I shouldn't start hating this guy. I should simply be able to live with this horrible picture. And we know now that actually the Amazon was before helping us, and now it's getting worse. It's putting out more carbon dioxide than getting in. So it's a swip over. And that was, this is a safety belt for the whole planet. And it's been burnt out. Yeah, but for me to handle, I have to be able to handle that. That's my mindfulness practice. So I close my eyes, I let it go. Then after some time, I come up again, let go again. And see, no, I haven't been doing that for some time. You brought me back, and it again brought up this. It's more tears than anger actually right now. It's just sadness. But for me, this image of these flames is just such a powerful icon of the power of greed and delusion. Mm. Can you believe that somebody would be so much under the influence of defilements to allow for that to happen? So little perspective of our future? This is possible. Oh, this is what defilements can do. And now I have taken away that particular person. I'm no longer going like, he shouldn't have become the president, and I wish somebody would kill him. I don't know what, This is. I'm talking about defilement. I'm seeing the whole situation defilement, and I see that a fraction of that defilement is still in my mind as well. I need to create a sense of commonality even with this particular person. Mm. Mm. And this is a way of working with it. This really leads me onward on the path. And this image of these flames will stay with me until the rest of my life, because it's just so powerful. But it's something very good I can always bring up whenever I should be coming too complacent with my situation. Because that's the danger. Bringing too much of emptiness, and then it's just, okay, the planet's going to fall apart. What to do? I mean, don't get upset. It's not like that. Mm. So I have these reminders to keep my balance, and as I work, as you say, it's a process. I work, I dialogue, I engage with these forces so that they come to a synergy that is based on Dharma, rooted in Dharma, and expresses itself in Dharma.
Thank you, thank you. You said you used the word dialogue there. Do you mean a sort of inner dialogue in that sort of a way?
Yeah, I don't have any chance to talk to Bolsonaro. That was in a dialogue.
Yeah, yes, that's interesting because I think the way we dialogue with ourselves is an important way of working with these thoughts and emotions, isn't it? It's like you're sort of dialoguing with different parts of yourself in that way. Are you familiar with that way of working as a practitioner?
I am not recalling anything in particular now about this approach, but this is just the work I see it. I mean, I'm not a monolithic person.
Yeah.
It's a basic thing of anatta. So there's these parts, and I'm mindfulness recognize them, and then they talk to each other. And I'm having fun.
Yes, thank you. We are running out of our time for the interview, and I want to make time for people to ask questions. So I'm just looking through some of the main things I wanted to go on to. I loved what you said about the need for contemplating impermanence and how making our peace with impermanence is an important way of making our peace with climate change, and letting go of our reactivity to climate change is part of letting go of our reactivity to death, including our own death. And you were saying that by making our peace with our own death, it's part and parcel of making our peace with climate change. It's all the same kind of reactions to deny our own death and to get obsessed with distractions so we don't have to face our own death. They all apply to climate change. People get obsessed with distractions. They get sometimes taken over by horror and panic and turn away and can't face it. But just to make peace with impermanence is, just that has such a crucial part to play. So I particularly wanted to rejoice in that part of your book. And another thing that your book provides is offering particular meditation practices where you can do that. And, contemplating impermanence is, it's always been part of meditation practice in the Dharma tradition, hasn't it? I just thought I'd finish by the third defilement that you mentioned, of the root defilements. You said greed, hatred, and delusion, and how delusion can manifest in resignation. And that was interesting. Talking about how people can fall into a kind of sense of, what can I do? It's all so big. I'm just little me. It's just this vast world. I'm helpless. There's nothing. I'm just a drop in the ocean. And then just feeling there's no point in trying to do anything. And then just falling into resignation. I just have to just passively accept the situation and just try and enjoy myself and have pleasure before it's too late. That kind of resignation is a deluded way of looking at things. So you were saying, so we are still so conditioned by monocausality in our culture, whereas the Buddha was trying to show how climate change and change for the better arise in dependence upon many, many conditions. And if we can stop saying, what can I do, and start looking at what can we do if we collaborate and cooperate and talk to one another and think communally and empathically and work together, then between us all we can have a big effect. And every single individual within that collaboration does make a difference and does have a part to play, because change arises in dependence upon every one of us, multiple conditions. And I think that reminded me of a point that Joanna Macy makes, is that we can fall into a sort of disempowering sense of helplessness, a disempowerment, but it comes out of this sense of thinking in an isolated way. Once we start thinking in a communal way and coming together in the way that we're doing on this conference, then you get a new sense of understanding that together we can do something, and a new sense of courage and morale and in a way a shared solidarity between us that can give us the strength to do that. So I wondered if you'd like to say more about that, moving from resignation into cooperative collaboration.
Well, you see, the way I approach it is that I do not make my personal conduct dependent on external results. So there's a way here that I go for walks whenever people come to see me. Whenever I see some trash there, I'll collect it and take it away. This action stands on its own, quite independently of what's happening to all the trash in the rest of the United States. I'm not doing it in the expectation that everybody will follow me, although if they would, it would be better. I'm doing it as an embodiment of my ecological concern, and that stands on its own. So my commitment to do something about climate change is an embodiment of the ethical part of my practice. If I'm the only human being on the planet who cares about this, I know that's not the case, I'm just exaggerating, I would still do it, knowing that it will not have an effect on the global level, but it has an effect on me. I'm embodying my values, I'm living them out, I'm manifesting them in the world. That in itself is enough. I don't need to start calculating, how many people have to start collecting trash on the roads of America for the whole situation to become better. I do something that if everybody would do it, it would change the situation. But I don't depend on everyone else, I depend on myself. I embody my values, my morality, my ideals. I live them out and I communicate them the best way I can. And then I let go. That is precisely what you said about this commonality instead of this individuality. I have that individual responsibility, but at the same time, I'm interrelating with others. I'm not taking this weight of monocausality on my head, like, oh, I have to save the world now. Oh, that's a big job, eh? No, I don't have to save the world. But I can be part of the network of those who are concerned about the future of this world. And we try to do the best we can. And then we let it go.
Well, that's a beautiful way of ending our interview and moving into the next phase of the session. So thank you very much. I'm the very, very a good note to end on. The prospect of working collaboratively together, and really enjoying that and taking heart from our shared enterprise. And in this way, having a new sense of vision for the future, as you said, that there are ways that humanity could, in a way, rise and actualize our true potential as potential awakened ones, because we haven't really fully lived up to our true potential on this planet yet, but there is so much potential in the future, and if we can just survive maybe the next couple of centuries, hopefully, the best is yet to come. For humanity. Anyway, I'm now going to invite people to send messages to Akasha Raja in the chat box. If there's anything you'd like Analayo to address. And we're going to have a 5-minute silent pause now while people assimilate what has been said and formulate their questions. Might take a little while to consider, put things into words, and then put them in the chat box. So Analayo and I will now fall silent so you can have a chance to reflect. So in the pause, feel free to type a question into the chat box and send it to Akasha Raja. And in a minute he'll start reading out questions for Analio and I. Well, Akasha Raja, do we have questions coming in? You're muted, Akasha Raja. Yeah, thank you.
We do indeed have some questions.
Good. So if you'd like to, we may not have time to answer all of the questions, but if you can recognize the common themes and then just read out a few representative questions, and then we can do our best between us.
There aren't too many, so we might be all right. Okay, so here's a question from Katya. So, Analio, you say in your book that looking at early Buddhist thought, one needs to avoid justifying environmental concerns by arguing that ecosystems have an inherent value. And this seems quite an anthropocentric perspective to me. And isn't this anthropocentrism part of what has brought us to where we are now?
Well, I try to answer that in my book in saying that, you see, I can only present one approach to the problem. And my whole work is based on the early Buddhist perspective. And approaching this problem from the early Buddhist perspective, you have to be anthropocentric. And there are a number of people in the Green Movement, quite independent from Buddhism, who also say that perception that anthropocentrism is the root of the problem is probably not quite to the point. And the problem is also that, in a way, you know, if I want to convince you and Smriti Ratana, we are anyway in the same bubble. We have the same values. We have to convince the people outside. If the people outside think that we are just crazy freaks who care more about animals than about humans, I'm exaggerating, they will not listen to us. It's very simple. So I'm not saying anthropocentric perspective is the only right one. I'm saying if we want to approach it from an early Buddhist viewpoint, that's the way to do it. Very clear in the sources. And it is not going to add to the problem, as I show in the rest of the book, because there's the compassionate motivation, of course. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Analio. The anthropocentric question was very thoroughly gone into in your first chapter, I think. So I think if people will read the book carefully, seeing that humanity has tremendous potential if we can only actualize it. And the problem with human collective selfishness rather than humanity as such. If we can learn to live well in relation to each other and towards nature, then in a way making a priority of how we live makes complete sense in a way. Time for another question, Akasha Raja.
Yes. So there's a clutch of questions about action and activism. So I'll put those all together. So there was one question. Well, the questioner is asking for Analayo's thoughts about non-violent direct action. And a similar question, so what do you think about Buddhists becoming engaged more politically in more political ways like Fridays for Future or Extinction Rebellion? And a further similar question, have you considered taking direct action yourself, such as meditating in front of a fossil fuel distributor? So all questions around the theme of direct action, of activism. So maybe you could address those, Amelia?
Thank you. Yeah, I think there's for each of us to find the way how we can best express our commitment. And as a Theravada monk, my own understanding of my role as a Theravada monk is not to go out and start demonstrating on the streets. I have other ways of doing that, but I'm very much supportive of that. I am aware of some very beautiful actions being done by Extinction Rebellion, for example, but I'm also aware of some actions which are actually counterproductive. And these often come because it seems that the situation has not been approached from a perspective of defilements and their repercussions. And so I would just say each of us has to find our way, how we deal with the situation, how we respond to it, but it should be within this overall ethical framework. If I do, for example, actions that interrupt the normal life of normal people, I am actually in some way inflicting harm on them. That's questionable if that's a good idea. And these people are probably not going to there like I'm blocking the road and they can't get to their job and the child is crying in the backseat because he wants to go to the doctor. I don't know what. And they're going, oh, thank you for preventing me from driving with my car. I realize you have a very important message to give. The planet is in danger. They're just going to hate us. It's not very productive. There are other actions for waking up people, like hunger strike, like meditating out somewhere, which are not inflicting harm, which maybe are not as extremely effective at first sight, but they have a stronger long-term repercussion. And so each of us has to really navigate, who am I, what is my position in society, how can I influence, but it should always stay within that ethical framework. Because after all, it's an attempt to face the repercussions of defilement externally. I should not let that make a cause for having defilements internally.
That was we could be talking all day about that one, but let's move on to another question, Akasha Raja.
Got to unmute yourself, Akasha Raja Praja.
I'll never learn, no matter how long we do this. My apologies. I'll start again. So there's a question which is, you spoke about the image of the burning Amazon as a way of moving from, hang on. I'm not quite sure. I can't quite understand that question. I'll come back to that one. I don't quite understand it. Singer Shraddha may want to clarify it. But I moved down to the next question, which was, thank you very much for this conversation, but especially Analayo's clarity and relevance to practice. This is from Maitricharya, who says, I love the phrase making peace with impermanence. Could Analayo say a little more about this?
I would like to pass this on to Smritiratna because he has been so much onto it, and I think he has something to say from his practice to that point.
I remember 3 years after coming across your book, Analayo, I did a 3-month retreat in the mountains in Spain. And my main practice was sitting at my shrine in front of a pile of bones. It was the bones of a dog that somebody had found, and they'd assembled the pile of bones. And I was sitting there, just sitting and gazing at the bones. And I was doing my metta bhavana and my mindfulness and my devotional practice, and all of it was taking place just sitting and looking at the pile of bones. And every so often I would reach out and I would tap on the skull of the dog, and I would tap on my own skull. Same thing, same bone. Me one day. It was very, very immediate, you know. And it, do you know, in those 3 months, all of the mental hindrances came up one after the other. And there was all this storms of anger and I'm not having it, and it mustn't be like this, and sometimes fear and anxiety, and sometimes I couldn't stay awake, and sometimes I got distracted and craving, like weather. And then sometimes the weather would clear, the bones were still there. And you know, by the end of the 3 months, I just felt so deeply peaceful. And not only that, my heart softened, and I just felt a sense of beautiful kind of soft-heartedness towards everyone on the planet. We are all in the same boat in a way. And if you go walking in nature, life and death are just there, all around us. The green leaves, the brown leaves, the living and the dead. It's just part of the way things are. And if we can just make our peace with that, then so much else follows from that. So that came out of my own experience, and I expect you've had many experiences like that too.
So beautiful that I don't have much to add on, but just to say that right behind this computer is my meditation seat, and there in the corner is a skeleton.
Next one, Akasha, Raja.
We're doing Melissa. Yeah, here's a question from Kamala D, which came in quite early, which is, when there is so much need, can you offer any guidance on where best to put one's energy? Perhaps noticing one's natural talents or looking for the easiest routes, which can also bring a balance of work and enjoyment.
Where else could it be if not in your own mind? And until we come and go and stay with our own mind, what can we really do? But if we come and stay now with our own mind, our actions will flow naturally out into the outward world. Naturally be the best we can possibly do.
Well, I'd only like to add that this is a topic for reflection. If we can cultivate a reflective mind through mindfulness and the opening of the heart, and then just sit with the reality of climate change, there will come a time organically in which we start to creative ideas start to come out of that. And this is again one of my favorite teachers, Joanna Macy. She recognizes the process that if you can make a priority, as Analayo says, of working with the mind and of opening to your emotions and your energies and making a space for that mindfully, opening to what you love and trust, opening your heart, and then once you're in that peaceful, open-hearted state, it is a naturally insightful state of mind. And creative possibilities will spontaneously arise in your mind, and you'll start to recognize, oh, I never thought of that. I could do this. I've got an ability in this. I could apply it in that way. But you need to, first of all, have faith in the potential of the mind and give it time. And then through cultivating a reflective and peaceful mind state, creative possibilities and ideas for action will spontaneously arise. We've got another 3 minutes left, Akasha Raja, so pick out some really good questions for us.
Okay, we have 4 questions, so I won't read them all. Here's one. I find holding equanimity very difficult. it can seem like being distressed or outraged is somehow skillful or even necessary to respond to the state of the world. So how can we find equanimity, and how do we prevent it from becoming disinterest and coldness?
Equanimity is only really fully understood when we have earlier worked with the other Brahmaviharas. And this is the way I teach it. The practice, the foundation in metta, in compassion, in sympathetic joy, is really what is the foundation for equanimity to arise. And only at that point will we really understand what equanimity is about. It's a very important question to sort these out. So I simply recommend to practice the Brahmaviharas. That will really lead to a clear understanding what equanimity is about.
Yeah, I completely concur with you, Analayo, that this word upekkha in Pali, it doesn't mean some cold disinterest. It's not indifference. It can be a very warm-hearted, loving, peaceful state. It includes compassion. It's not instead of compassion, but it only arises at the end of a process of working with your emotional energies that includes opening to the pain, opening to your real feelings, letting yourself feel them, and finding ways of steadying the mind, reflecting on impermanence and so on. And then equanimity arises as in a way as an end point in a whole process. It's very different from just a kind of passivity, a kind of cold indifference. So working with mindfulness and metta and the other Brahmaviharas effectively culminates in this beautiful quality of loving serenity, another way of translating upekkha.
Maybe I have a little image for the Brahmaviharas as a way of rounding up all our discussion. So the way I compare them is to take the first three as different aspects of the sun. Metta is like the sun at midday, which shines on everyone equally and gives warmth and doesn't wait for reciprocation. Compassion is like the sun at sunset. Darkness is very close by, yet the sun shines all the more beautiful. Mudita, sympathetic joy. Empathetic joy is like the sun at sunrise in the early morning. Birds are singing, few dewdrops here and there. Sun ray comes, sparkles in the light. Equanimity, upekkha, is like the full moon. It doesn't shine itself, but it reflects all the sunshine of the other three Brahmaviharas. With this image, I like to close and thank you all. I am very, very happy to have been here with you. I've had an opportunity to exchange on a topic that is very important for me. And I hope I've said something that is more or less meaningful or helpful for you on your path. And yeah, we're all together on the same path to deepening awareness and compassion. Thank you.